afternoon and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. We're streaming live from the Boathouse here at Confluence Park. My name's Jane Scott, and it's a privilege to serve as the President and CEO of the Columbus Metropolitan Club and to welcome you here today. You know, we just can't get over the sadness of not having you here with us at the Boathouse, but we're very fortunate and happy that you're joining us live streaming, and we're going to have a great program today. The Metropolitan Club live streaming is presented by the Emergency Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch and PNC. We really appreciate your support. Thank you very much. We'd like to also thank all of our sponsors in general. This has been a wonderful year, and we appreciate your continued support. We're especially grateful for all of you who have purchased virtual seats throughout the last 9 months. Your contribution has really made it possible for us to continue the conversation through this live stream. Thank you so much. We've discussed a lot of tough topics this year in the last 9 months, but today we're going to look at something that's a much more positive topic. Can't Stop Columbus website says, we envision a city that not only survives the challenges created by this global pandemic, but emerges stronger and more resilient. Stronger because the solutions delivered by Can't Stop Columbus have made a difference in the lives of those most impacted by COVID-19. More resilient because CSC has created a model for a more targeted and efficient approach to delivering solutions to our community's most urgent needs. End quote. 10 months from the start of the pandemic, it's been a long journey with an end still many months away, but hope springs from many places. So let's hear about the Can't Stop Columbus story today. Director of Smart Columbus and co-organizer of Can't Stop Columbus, Jordan Davis. Principal consultant of Humankind at the Columbus Foundation, Heather Tsavaris. And our host, co-anchor, and journalist at WSYX ABC6, Stacia Naquin. Stacia, it's all yours.
All right, thank you so much, Jane. Such an exciting topic because the name says so much. Can't Stop Columbus. This isn't just a name, this is a statement. Tell us where that came from and the goals when you started this journey.
Well, I'll tee it up, and then I'd love to show a video with all of you. But it began on a Sunday, actually, right when the governor made the order to close bars and restaurants in response to COVID, just before St. Patrick's Day. And I put a tweet out, and I tagged some people in the innovation space, like Ben Blanquera, Tech Columbus, several others. And I essentially said, let's do a hackathon. Let's get like these innovative people in a room to put these ideas forward about how we can help our community get through this. Like, this change is gonna be dramatic. That's all I felt. I was like, there are smart people out there that can figure this out together. And overnight, actually 3 Ohio State students worked on a proposal, and they came up with the name Can't Stop Columbus. And when we met in the morning, they had created a Slack channel. We got a bunch of co-organizers of other community tech efforts like Give Back Hack, and several other kind of Open Columbus efforts that were experienced in community organizing of this sort, and all of a sudden it became a life of its own. And from that day until today, there is a relentless effort by hundreds of members of this community that use the muscle of the Columbus way to just say, let's get together and help. And I think this video, while it does not do justice to the breadth of work that this community has done under this platform, it certainly, I think, helps to communicate some of the ways that the community rallied to help.
Let's take a look.
Stop Columbus volunteers donated their time to distribute more than 22,000 meals to families in need this year during the height of the COVID shutdown.
The meals purchased by Can't Stop Columbus for the We Feed CBUS project help those Hermanos sustain through the pandemic while providing a much-needed service to healthcare workers and vulnerable populations in Columbus.
You help bring Fresh Track to life and get it out into the community to serve all those in need. We've served about 20,000 to date, and we couldn't have done it without you.
And together we created the Teach Back program that parents and educators used so that way their children and students could teach back what they were able to learn during the middle of this pandemic.
Can't Stop Columbus and COVAL help the Columbus City Schools understand the digital divide needs for our students.
And they also assisted to ensure that every graduating senior of the class of 2020 had gift boxes representing how we can't stop us.
And for the first time in 43 years, we were not able to hold our annual Music and Arts Festival. Can't Stop Columbus was such a lifesaver. They developed a website for us to be able to showcase our exhibitors, and we even had a drive-through food truck fest.
Can't Stop CBUS designed a virtual suiting process for us, helping more women in our community get back to work.
Come Together Columbus formed at the height of calls for racial justice in the wake of George Floyd's death. We turned to Can't Stop CBUS to help us establish a digital presence, but to also support the Black Excellence rallies that we held at City Hall.
And we were so honored to have Gravity Uplifts, a public art project, be made possible by this incredible platform.
Curbside Concert was an innovative Can't Stop Columbus initiative that brought us together, that brought music right to the curbside to some of our most vulnerable and most disconnected.
We awarded Can't Stop Columbus the 2020 Arts Innovation Award for the powerful impact their programs had on the community. Spirits were lifted, arts access increased, and artists were paid for creating beautiful work that brought us together in this difficult time.
I know you said that we may not see the breadth of what's been accomplished, but that covered a lot of ground. So when we talk about the needs of this community, that feels like it's an ever-changing marker every single day, and the needs that you'll find are different in different parts of the community. So how do you decide what to tackle and how to make an impact?
Well, I'll tee up a little bit and then pass it to Heather. So there really weren't boundaries when we started. It was just, we were in crisis mode as a community, and it was all hands on deck. Anything that we could do, any need that existed. And so needs come to the Can't Stop Columbus effort in a few different ways. One is a nonprofit says, hey, raise your hand, like, we need help with this. And the predominant focus was, this is an all virtual community. Many of us never have even met in human form, but it really facilitates a lot of tech development. So for a great example was the Mid-Ohio Food Collective. They wanted to be able to take pre-orders for food. So early on they said, hey, we have this idea for an app, we've done a lot of work, we just need to get it up and running. So we had a whole team of developers organized, develop project management process, and support the food bank in bringing this project to life. And now they've been able to do 20,000, some people have been able to use that platform because of the early tech work. So that's one way, and there's a lot. We've probably supported about 35 different organizations with direct response for that. Then there were kind of crowdsourced ideas. So, we've had probably 1,700 people log on to this Slack channel platform, 700 active, volunteers, but people will say, hey, I'm observing a shortage of PPE. Like, we need to organize and mobilize to do this. So we had small businesses coming, 3D printing masks. They've given over 12,000 different masks to the community. And it was all self-organized in these Slack channels virtually, and it aligned with partner need. So in that case, someone raised their hand and say, we know there's a shortage out there, let's just focus on increasing supply. And then we helped them understand where the need was. So we worked with Franklin County Emergency Services, CODA, others that were needing those PPE, and kind of matched the supply with the demand. And then there was a whole bucket of work that I'm personally really proud of us taking time to do, which is we understood there were trends that probably would suggest there's pain in ways that maybe the community of volunteers that have the privilege to, work from home or have this level of connected skills, that they might not have the lived experience of some of where our greatest pain is in our community right now. And if we know what that might be, how do we understand that, connect with that issue, and then help empower solutions to doing that. And this is where our partnership with Heather and the Columbus Foundation really deepened, I think, the work and the impact and diversified the types of solutions that this community of volunteers were able to help bring to life. So
how were you able to weigh in on that?
Yeah.
So I'm thank you for the tee up, and I'm remembering our first conversation, right? And I'm remembering when you called and said we're doing this, but how do we get to the harder problems? And it's something that we've been doing, a little bit at the foundation since 2019, where we've really tried to think about how is our community doing, and how can we go really deeply in partnering with community to improve what needs to be improved, but doing that not as us as experts, but doing it as the community as experts, right? Partnering with community in a way that really, walking alongside in this co-design, human-centered design, where we go and try and understand very, very deeply what is the empathy, right? What is happening? What are those stories? Where is the pain coming from? And how can we then determine, the insights and get creative around what are the possible solutions. And then with this army of Can't Stop Columbus volunteers and this tech talent and all of these folks to say, wait a second, this is much deeper because we've co-designed with community, right? We've walked and really deferred our own expertise to understand what are people experiencing right now and how can we really help to solve those issues.
How has that taken new meaning? You talk about human-centered design. That's not a phrase that is necessarily part of our everyday conversation, but seems like it's taken on a whole new meaning this year. So how would you explain that further?
Yeah, so, it's interesting because I think for me, I was brought onto the foundation to really found and think about our work in well-being, right? So the first thing we did was think about environmental scan. We're all over the world. How are people thinking about well-being in community, right? And then how are they improving it? And one of the things that we kept hearing and kept learning is that people had all kinds of different approaches. But sometimes the mark was missed because the actual communities weren't brought into the room to help solve, right? And so we would hear about, Latino men, for instance, having very poor health outcomes. One of the solutions was Fitbits. Well, the idea was, okay, this is interesting, but it didn't improve anything because there wasn't a deep understanding of why there were those poor outcomes to begin with. There wasn't a deep understanding of what were the systemic issues, what were the lived issues, and so we kind of looked at that and said, wait a second, how could we do this better? And so, in 2019, we had some of our own demonstration projects, and I think this opportunity to really collaborate with Jordan and the broader community to say, hey, this is something we would love to influence how our community solves problems. Why not now and in this space? And if not now, when?
When you're talking about hitting the mark like that, how do you measure success for a collective effort like this? Because in every way, you want to make sure you're hitting the mark for this particular issue, but that's also going to affect future programs. So how do you measure success for this kind of collective movement?
That's a great question, and I think something that's still evolving because many of the solutions are still in prototype. I mean, there are, 61 different projects have been mobilized around. 61. And it's not just like one person had an idea. I mean, there's like multiple people spending their evenings, weekends, and in many regards daytime, or donating their employees' time to trying to figure out how to pursue these challenges. And so one way of impact is simple measurement. Sherry Cheney-Jones and Measurement Resource Group volunteered and pro bono gave services to help build frameworks for the projects to really be impact oriented. We also stood up kind of a program management team. Derek DeHart, Ben Blanquera, Josh Harrison, so many others, Dave Unger, helped really work across all of the different projects to create project measurement, essentially, to make sure that we were getting feedback loops that helped pivot the projects to be more successful. But I think it comes back to, like, are we actually serving a need? And like with the first, design sprint, we prototyped through this effort, and now we've done, 7 or 8 at this point this year, just on this like deeper empathy work. But was a call that we got from Council President Hardin, which he called me one day and he said, hey, I'm really worried about our senior citizens in the community. The rec centers have closed. This is their place for gathering, and I feel like they're missing that social connection, and they're probably not as digitally savvy to be able to, have Zoom, Zoom hangouts, right, with their girls. So And he was like, maybe we should create a call bank. And I was like, okay, that's interesting, but I really want to better understand why there might be a sense of loneliness. And so we did a design sprint, if you want to kind of talk about the insights that we learned. And there's 2 projects that actually were created out of that I think have been very impactful, but on 2 totally different measurement planes. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about that, and I think it was this idea of, okay, how do we talk to a whole bunch of seniors, and over the weekend to really understand what's happening right now, right? It was very early in the pandemic. It was very early in the lockdown. And, we said, okay, let's try and deeply understand how they're feeling, right? And what the problems are that they're experiencing. And 2 things I think really came up. The first one was interesting because it was almost, we kept hearing from grandparents, and they're like, we're talking to our grandkids and we get to play with them a little bit, and we kind of laugh, but then we're like, oh, should we be laughing in this moment, right? Should we have levity when there's so much despair? And it made us really wonder about this joy, right? Because it was like, are you allowed to have joy in this moment? And we all need joy, right? A little bit. And how can you cultivate that, and how can you also send that, right, in a way? And so I'll give you the other insight, and then both of the projects. But the other insight was around this purpose and meaning and contribution, right? That elders, we all need, frankly, right? But especially in this moment when you've been disconnected from maybe your volunteer work, or maybe, just going to the rec center, whatever it is. And so what are the ways that we might infuse that or bring that back and really center on purpose and meaning and contribution? And so out of those kind of 2 insights, we came up with the first being curbside concerts, this idea of sending joy to someone, using the amazing musical talent here in Columbus to show up on your doorstep and literally sing, but having someone can send that to you, right?
And that's the powerful part of it. Like, just getting a concert at your curbside is cool. Like, I want a concert, right? Like, why wouldn't you? Right. But the fact that it was a gesture of love, right? So just a personal story, my father turned 60, and we were planning this bucket list trip to go to New York to see Billy Joel. Him and I, it's our favorite artist together. And we'd been planning this plan, and we had to cancel because of COVID. But I was able to send him a curbside concert then, and the artist sang all Billy Joel. But it was the emotion of that moment that we weren't able to have in person, but that gesture of love. And that, I think, they still talk about it. I mean, they still talk about it. It's the highlight of their pandemic, and we were able to give that to 750 families. And I think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, yes. And on the other side, what we realized very quickly about elders is we heard about these calls, right? Because everyone was making calls, in your church or your synagogue or whatever. Everybody had the list of who are the elders in the community that we can call to check on. And what we kept hearing is those calls only lasted so long, right? Do you have food? Do you have your medicine? Are you okay, right? And we heard from the volunteers, and we also heard from the elders. They were like, well, I mean, it was a nice call, but it was a pretty perfunctory.
Basic.
Right, exactly, right? And then we started to really unpack, well, wait a second, like, is there a way you could have a more meaningful conversation? Because everyone wanted to help, right? Like, there were a lot of people who wanted to connect. And what we realized very quickly in the cases of these elders, they've lived entire lives. They can actually contextualize this pandemic in ways that younger people just can't. So what if we make them helpers, right? Like, how could we reframe that so that they can help teach us, right, younger people, how we might contextualize this? And so we came up with the Connect Us stories, where they would share their lives, they would share their stories of adversity, they would share how they've overcome things, so that it would, number one, for the volunteers, and I will tell you, I made many of those phone calls and would be in tears, doing them, right? But it gave such connection and such meaning to, I think, to all of us who are involved, right? And how you can make those stories matter so much in this moment.
And they're being archived at
Yes.
the Columbus Library and the Columbus Archives, so for local history, because they're telling stories of, them combating, segregation and getting through that, or different rights movements that different populations have experienced, and hardship in their lives. And so those are like, you're not doing as much quantity, but you're doing really deep qualitative impact. And so I think that this example, I think, shows the breadth of measurement and impact.
How do you make sure that that impact is focused? Because if you're talking about 61 projects over 12 areas, it seems like it could be very easy to get spread thin very quickly. So how do you make sure that that impact is meaningful?
Well, you first want to say, like, we all have to kind of step back and say, could any other community have done this? And it's not me, it's not Heather, it's not any of us individuals, it's just the spirit of this community. Like, we just knew that when this happened, we come together. That's what we do. We work together. And we focus on how to help. And so that Columbus way, I think, came to life in a totally new dimension through this work. And through that, there was these autonomous kind of efforts. Like, there are many communities within this virtual space where I couldn't even do justice telling the story because, I mean, there's still, you know, there's this amazing story of, we did a design sprint with CCAD and Star House, focused on the caseworkers, so the individuals helping homeless youth kind of navigate through their lives and the mental health of those care workers. And one of the things that came out of the insights was they really missed hugging and caring for those youth that they have such a relationship with. And so these individuals were like, well, we need to figure out how to virtually hug people. So they've developed a remote hugs app where you can send a hug and you can touch it simultaneously, and there's a vibration that happens across the two phones simultaneously. You think of it and you're like, oh, that's kind of trivial, but when you do it, it like brings tears, you get a lump in your throat because you're like, that human connection. And they brought that to life. That team has gone through Rev 1's, startup camp. They went through Give Back Hacks, Social Enterprise Accelerator, and there's a whole team self-organizing. So it's not just a command and control model. It's like this new power model where everybody is kind of managing, but we're learning across the projects, which is really cool. Like, there's a community of how do we better manage volunteers? How do we better connect with our partners? So I love that aspect of it, that it's not about how do the co-organizing team manage it. It's just how do we facilitate more people being as wildly successful as possible,
Yeah, I would almost add this idea of process, right? Like, process is not a fun thing to talk about, right? But I would say it is this process, right? And it is the way this has been organized so that I think people really feel like, I care about this issue. Oh, look, I can find others who care, who can help, who have these skills. So, I mean, I think I'm impressed by the process of Can't Stop Columbus and the way that those partnerships have been created and the platforms are there to really enable people to contribute, I think, in ways that are deeply meaningful to them, but then also hopefully to the community as well if we've done it right.
Well, and you're right, this community is special. And I love that you went forward with this effort knowing people are going to come together. They just will, because that's what we do here. But I imagine you've learned a lot in the process, too, about this community. What surprised you, each of you, when you really started to dive into the data and the needs and the way people wanted to help? What surprised you the most about this community?
I can say personally I've learned so much through this year and through this process. I think there were new voices involved in the process that weren't in the traditional, maybe downtown, Columbus efforts, right, that came from all over. There were people in other parts of the world that had a Columbus connection that worked on things. And I think there was a sense of community that went beyond geography. That I think is a secret opportunity for this community. Like, you think about all roads lead to Columbus, right? Like, what if we could harness that Columbus connection ongoing at a different time, right? I think there's also maybe the hard thing I think we're all gonna start to have to wrestle with is there was this emotion and energy to a change that we all felt, right? Like, we all felt this moment of the shutdown in some way, and we were all in this together. But slowly, as time has passed, we're starting to realize that we didn't all experience it in the same way. It's exactly like it's snowing outside, it's beautiful. We're all experiencing this snow in some way. Some have giant windows to enjoy it. Some are in dark basements. Some, right, are out working in it. Others never even have to touch it. Like, everybody experiences the impacts of this differently and for a longer period of time. And I think it's what I hope is that moment where it touched you and it affected your life, you had this motivation to help. How do we bottle that feeling up and reapply it 6 months from now, 8 months from now, when some of our lives get back to normal and others are still impacted by it, and a lot of what we're learning through the crisis is that most of these problems existed before COVID. They're just more exacerbated now, and they're more evident and in focus than they were. And so, but they were always there. So the crisis is not like gonna go away. It's just gonna maybe have a different priority level in our psyche. And so I wonder how what this has proved to me is the power of this energy, this collective energy in the community. And then I think there are challenges, how do we keep that in the future?
What about you, Heather? What's been surprising for you?
So I think I would say, and Jordan would probably attest, I'm a big adherent of design thinking, right? And because of that human-centered piece. But I would say that the part that has surprised me the most is how little we know. And how little, and often we think we know, right? And we don't. And if we're not talking to people who are frontline, if we're not talking to people who are walking that experience, and frankly, if we're not leaning on their expertise, shame on us. And it just becomes so relevant constantly. And I think it's that thing of, lived experts, people who know their situation better than anyone ever will, right? And so every time I think we do this or have these experiences, it just reaffirms for me how important partnering in that way is, and doing it equitably and doing it in a way that feels right. But it confirms for me the importance of that.
When people are watching this and they hear what you all are saying and they feel that energy too, and maybe they haven't known where to put it, how do they get involved with Can't Stop Columbus and this collective effort?
Yeah, so it's, we hope we are making it easier, but we can always get better at that. A few things to know, we do organize on a platform called Slack. It's free to join and easy. You can go to the website, can'tstopcolumbus.com, and complete a volunteer form, and then that'll enlist you into our Slack channel. And then we have a team of navigators, and these team of navigators are helping understand your skill sets, your time availability, and then can help connect you into the right projects and the right need. And it's we hope, kind of a personalized approach to really take advantage of what you're willing to offer right now. There are, if you are interested in financially contributing to Can't Stop Columbus, we are really grateful to Facebook for being our kind of flagship investor in this process. And we use those dollars to help fund design sprints where we're actually paying people that we're interviewing, helping get the solutions out there in user acquisition. And then we're also always interested in partners. So people who know what problems exist, who know how to execute, whether you're a really technical data science company, let us know what those skill sets are, and we could actually design something with your pro bono skill set to help solve a problem. So we want to work with you. If you want to get involved, we want to help you find a way.
You mentioned that a lot of this work for so many people that are already involved has happened virtually. You've never even met.
Yeah.
And you're accomplishing all these things for the community. What kind of challenges have you found within that space working together, and maybe benefits as well?
So, it's interesting because I think a lot of the benefits, there are a couple of things, right? I think there's an intimacy in the online that can happen, right? And I'm speaking from the kind of the design perspective and how we understand people's experiences and what you're able to see and get to, and I think across the kind of that space, people are saying, whoa, we're surprised at how much we can learn virtually, right? We're surprised by how quickly we can get to some really serious issues virtually. So I think that has been something. Yeah, and I think it's interesting to just see, in some ways, you might be able to scale it a little bit quicker because of the virtual nature of it. When you have people jumping from project to project and doing these different things, there's a little bit of time efficiency, I think, that can happen because of the virtual nature, frankly.
And so many people are in that space right now.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's just such incredible tools, you know, Slack, Miro, Airtable, all of which have been very generous to Smart Columbus, giving us free subscriptions to essentially manage and coordinate all of this. But I think what's so great about these tools is they do bring efficiency. One of the barriers could be is that if you aren't digital savvy or you weren't a native of some of these tools, the learning curve could be harder. We have a lot of people who've not been able to get as involved as they want because they don't know how to use Slack. So I think trying to overcome those digital literacy gaps or just digital divide gaps in general, which has been a big issue we've been trying to lean in on through this, you know, that certainly is a barrier. But I would say, you know, Heather and I probably talk multiple times a week, and this is our first time in human form all year. So, yeah, it's, you know, you can really build relationships. I think most of the co-organizing team, you know, a few of them I know in human form, but most of them I'm friends with virtually. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
New times.
Yeah, and I think it's also important, and we would be remiss not to talk about the nonprofits, right? And so many of the people who already have relationships that we, frankly, have been able to leverage because they know who they're serving. And so, you know, in some ways, they've already done really hard work, and we're, you know, taking an opportunity to say, okay, let us help you do more. Let us be helpful in that way. So
when we say can't stop Columbus, what does that mean to you going into the new year?
Oh, for me, I mean, I think Jordan and I have talked about this. The crisis of March, right, was very real. But I think about what comes when the health things get easier, right? What happens when light is really shown on all of the things that have been happening, right? When the eviction moratorium comes off, right? When we realize how much learning loss has actually happened for our kiddos, right? When we think about mandatory reporters not seeing kids right now, what is happening and how will we deal with those issues? So for me, when I think about Can't Stop Columbus, I think this is amazing, right? And yet, I think this is just a pregame to what has to happen if a community is really going to address the mass suffering that we will see in the very near future. So, I mean, we talk about flexing muscle and muscle memory. I mean, the big game is coming. So Can't Stop Columbus to me means that we have to be ready for that.
What about you, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I could have said it better. I think Can't Stop Columbus to me means there's no challenge big enough that can stop this community from doing what's necessary to make this a better community for everyone. And I don't think there's an arrival point where it's like, you know, Columbus has made it. I think it's an ongoing iterative process. But I hope that this effort and this community platform at least suggests that every single person that wakes up in this city has a role to play. And we hope that this makes it easier for some. It won't obviously facilitate everyone's ability to help and support and move us in that direction, but I think the mantra of Can't Stop Columbus is something we should all think about, of what my role is in ensuring that Columbus, it doesn't stop, that nothing's in our way from moving forward.
It's an empowering message, for sure. We want to move to questions from our audience in just a few minutes. We hope to have some live audience questions, from our live folks. They're online, and we're going to have some questions from the live stream, of course. But I want to ask you, I saw this quote from you, Jordan. Leave your selfish interests at the door, bring your community interests to the table. Why is that such an important statement for this moment?
So it's a statement that I came to learn about from my work with the Columbus Partnership, and it's something that I really believe is very appropriate in every community setting, which is when you're doing community work, it's not about the business benefit or the PR benefit or the marketing benefit. I think we have to kind of think about what is right for the community, and if we can get more oriented around this human-centered design, around the end user, around the impact, and it's a culture shift in a lot of rooms and a lot of places. And I think with my work at Smart Columbus and at the foundation, I think this is a place that we can go as a community where we are very focused on let's really empathize and understand and create space for other people to be involved in the solutioning process. And so I think even if it's not you that gets called on, right? It's about well, are we doing the best thing for the community? Even if it's not in my personal best interests, that I wasn't the one selected, or I wasn't the one to get credit, or I wasn't the one to do that. I think this idea that we're focused on what's the right thing for the community, and let's do everything that it's gonna take to deliver on that, I think is a mindset of abundance where we all have a role to play again, you know?
You must see that quite a bit with the Columbus Foundation, where people have that vision, they know what they want to do something, they're not sure how. How do you empower people, and especially right now, when in so many ways we can feel disconnected?
Yeah, so I think so much of it is about lifting up the stories, right, of people who are experiencing, you know, frontline things. And I think it's really about, you know, I mean, how do you solve for disconnectedness? How can we learn about one another? How can we understand the similarities, frankly, of our human journey? And how can we make sure that you know, we're not that different, and we need to, you know, understand that but be connected. And so I think it's really our responsibility to lift that up.
It's a very important message. Of course, it is CMC's tradition to take audience questions. Since we don't have a live audience here with us, we want to connect with the folks who are watching online, of course. And we have Lenny Cuthbert of CMC curating questions for us from the live stream audience. So we hope that folks will keep their questions coming. What do you have for us?
Stacia. Kathleen Fox asks, many young people in our community are not engaged and they may not have access to learning tech skills. Does Can't Stop Columbus have plans to engage underrepresented youth so they can learn tech skills and bring them to Can't Stop Columbus?
Great question. I actually think that's a really honest identification of a gap in our community, that especially when we're in an all virtual, predominantly virtual world where a lot of people are getting lost in the shadows. We've really been helping a partner with Columbus City Schools. That's been our top priority to date. Predominantly working with them from a data science perspective, understanding the digital divide and where disengagement is occurring, and the patterns that might correlate to why. And that's really been parlayed with some human-centered design that the Columbus Foundation has been leading as well, in understanding disengagement. And then furthermore, helping to really understand how in these virtual environments, people can feel like individuals. And so we've been focused with the schools. I think this idea of how do we assist with digital literacy and make sure that people have the skill sets, I think that's a phenomenal place in a good direction, and maybe something, a new opportunity for a project.
Yeah, and maybe just to piggyback a little bit to Jordan's point about working with Columbus City Schools, it has been very important to us in our collaborative work and also in the foundation work that we are partnering with young people. Actually, we are partnering with the students. The students were, you know, they become co-designers with us. They are the ones telling us, you know, what their experiences are like, so that we can then get to better solutions. And so, not that it's a formal tech program, but it is something that I think, you know, I think they're learning design skills, and frankly, I think they have better design skills than I do, right? Just intuitively, and we're paying them in that work. That is also very important for us from an equity standpoint. We're paying them to bring their expertise to the table, to show up in those Zoom meetings, to really tell us what are we getting right and what aren't we getting right, so that we can go back, you know, and say, let's do this better as a community.
And I would say we have used tech training programs that are short-term certificate training programs. We've found spaces for them to work on the teams and be mentored by more advanced, you know, technical programmers that might be leading the efforts. So we've done 2 projects like that, where they've been able to take on projects like that.
That's great. Steve Swift asks, is Can't Stop Columbus collaborating with other either Ohio or outside Ohio cities or towns that could help leverage the strength and reach of your program?
Steve. We thought about that a lot at the beginning. We were like, we could just change this to Can't Stop Us and take it and, you know, chapterize it and take it to a bunch of cities. But we really felt like the passion and the energy within this community needed to just double down on our own community. And That said, we have had several projects that have been replicated. So one of the first projects that was launched was called Support Columbus Eats. It was a crowdsourced site that allowed people to log in when restaurants were open and who delivered for them, because there were all these apps. You didn't know how to do anything at that point in time. And so that was actually replicated in 8 different cities. And so there are, Dayton actually stood up a similar effort, and we helped them get started. So we've been sharing as much as we can, but it's not been a top priority.
This is a question actually for me. How do you decide what to prioritize with so many needs and wants and so many issues?
Do you want to
go? Sure, I can tee us off. So, I mean, one of the things that we have done is really try to partner with our nonprofit community, right? To understand they are front lines, they are doing so very much. And so trying to understand from them what is surfacing, right? I think, we've also tried to reach out to community leaders and to understand what's happening in places that we wouldn't know about. How do you lift that up to really make sure we're having those conversations, and also I think, this cadre of co-designers, of people who we have been reaching out to, continuing those relationships so that we continue to know what are the issues that matter most. So I think we have a whole bunch of issues, and we're hearing why it is important to people. And then from a priority standpoint, I can throw it back to Jordan for what gets chosen.
Yeah, well, when it comes to getting chosen, there's a marriage of 2 things. It has to be, an issue that's validated, right? That's like, this is something that's important, but then you need a team that wants to work on it. So part of it is, do you have a strong project manager? Is there somebody that's willing to put in the time to corral and help facilitate the volunteers to do this? And if there isn't one, it might not be the first thing we take on, but we have it on the list. And so we have a new emerging projects effort where we try and find skilled volunteering, which I think is another great avenue we've evolved into. So like Nationwide Innovation Team has given pro bono their designers that are trained in human-centered design. They have 60 some people, professionals trained in human-centered design. They gave us people for 5 business days to go deep in these projects. Lextant did the same thing. Global design firm that designs like Ford, products for Ford of their infotainment systems, gave time to do a sprint about childcare, how to reopen childcare facilities. Grange Insurance is donating staff time for volunteer talent to help Dress for Success realize a virtual suiting process so that those women who are in the interview process don't have to physically go into the store. So I do think there's a little bit of a marriage between urgency and priority. Even if it's still a priority, we might need to take a little bit more time to make sure we have the right team to implement.
We're so fortunate to live in a community that is so diverse. How are you making sure that you are meeting needs for the diversity that exists within our community, and also that the team working on those projects also reflect the diversity of our community?
Yes, agreed. So a few things that we've done through the process. One is the co-organizer group really was organic at the beginning. It was kind of who first came in and dug in, right? And so after a while we got organized, we really had to look in the mirror and say, is this organizer team really reflective? Is it really diverse of that? And so we've diversified that co-organizer team by intentionally recruiting people that had different perspectives, represented different parts of diversity. I would also say within our volunteer group, we've tried to do similar things in partnering with community groups that tapped into a more diverse network. And then through having a very intentional commitment, which is where the human-centered design kind of came out with, is said, there are issues that are impacting low-income communities and communities of color that are not being adequately represented in the crowdsourced feed of ideas. And that was an early call out, I think, to reflecting on, and prior to June, and really thinking about how do we do that. And so we acknowledged that technology was a barrier, and the role of an essential worker didn't provide them the extra time to lead in and have their voices heard of, hey, this is an issue. So we tried to acknowledge the open source power of this effort, but also try and say, well, let's get more curated and focused. And I think that this is something that we're going to have to continue to work on always, especially in community involved spaces. So I think some of the things that we've taken on, like paying people of lived experience to participate in some of the design work, has definitely helped diversify and get some of those experiences that wouldn't otherwise be in the room. But being intentional, to be honest.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say, you know, for our own practice at the foundation, one of the things that has been very important to me is when we're hiring designers and we're hiring national equity designers, and every team that we have hired has been predominantly Black or of color. And that has been incredibly important because the issues that we were working on, they impact communities of color, you know, African American communities here. And so making sure that, and frankly, for us, it's the co-designers, these lived experts. So, you know, when we're working on a project about youth who've experienced homelessness, we had, for instance, 3 young women of color who had experienced homelessness, who we paid to join our design team because we knew there was nothing that we could tell them about homelessness, frankly, right? But if we were going to try and understand how can we better serve young people in our community who are experiencing homelessness right now during times of COVID, we couldn't do it without their help. We couldn't do it without their guidance, without their expertise, right? So it's really about, for us at the foundation, doing that, to Jordan's point, very intentional work. And I think us getting to have that laboratory of doing that work, and then this collaboration where we can throw some of that and say, Jordan, we're paying everyone. We're paying them for their time when we interview them. We're paying them when they come to, you know, to be a co-designer with us. We are working around their schedule. 2 of our women were essential workers on that first sprint. And so we were meeting at 6 to 10 p.m. We made it work because we knew our schedules didn't matter, frankly. They were the voices that had to be in the room. They were the voices. And so I think that is something that this is forcing us to do better.
I think also just in the wake of George Floyd's death, there was a big question of, do we take on projects that support the Black Lives Matter movement? Is it just about COVID? And I think there was an overwhelming agreement that this is just as much of a crisis, and this, if not more, and we need to help the community solve for this. And so that's where we've gotten involved in helping projects stand up that are fighting for racial justice, that are creating accountability scores around equity commitments that are being made in the community. So I think there is an acknowledgement that these issues are real and they're confronting our community, and we have to organize.
We have another online question. Again, Kathleen Fox. We saw after 9/11 that communities came together, but it wasn't sustained. How will Can't Stop Columbus sustain this amazing program in the future years when the immediate and evident pain has passed?
Kathleen, you are right on the money. It kind of gets to one of the pieces I mentioned earlier of how do we bottle that initial energy and momentum up in the long term. I think it is human nature. We can only take on so much. Our lives get back into balance and things start to fall off the priority list or in the priorities of the ways that we use our mind space. So I think one of the biggest challenges will be continuing to honestly sell the urgency of the problem. That will be it's hard to communicate messages today without having a big platform and a lot of resources. And so I think that will be a challenge, but an important thing to do. The second will be, I think, a lot heavier effort on curation. So if we can be more selective with making sure the projects are really identified early on, and then really curating that team to make sure we're matching people with the right commitments, I think we'll have to be more focused on the recruitment effort and the onboarding for teams.
And one thing I would say is that the crisis will inevitably pass, right? But I think what doesn't pass is people's need to belong. People's need to contribute. People's need to have purpose and meaning. And I feel like so many of the volunteers have found that in this opportunity. And so for me, I think the magic is, how do you keep giving people that opportunity, right? And so I think this vehicle that, you know, Jordan and I have talked about this, it's not like you have to fill out an application or do a video interview or have 7 people, you know. No, this is, I want to help, just show me the way. And this is showing people the way, and I think there's real merit and promise in hopefully the sustainability of that part.
Yeah. And I would just offer, like, Smart Columbus has been a backbone supporting this effort, and we will continue to be. We think this is a tremendous platform for innovation in our community, for engagement, and so we want to continue to nurture that. So I think with us remaining a backbone, we can help it as it evolves.
So when you look at 2021, what is the big goal for Can't Stop Columbus?
I think that it's seen as essential. Like, I think in 2021, I hope that the sense of belonging, the sense of purpose of all the people that contributed can feel a place in those milestones that I hope we get to. Those moments where we can take masks off, the moments where you know, our schools are reopened, and we have moments where there are bright spots that we can say, if not for, you know, these contributions, that didn't achieve. And I hope that we feel a few of those next year. But I do also hope that there are still a lot of heads down, a lot of hard workers out there working on these issues too.
I think for 2021, for me, it's continuing to get better at the work, continuing to get better at understanding community, at partnering. You know, it really, you know, I feel like to Jordan, I mean, it's amazing, right? The list of accomplishments, and yet I feel like it's only scratched the surface. So how do you use this and channel it and harness it to touch more people and to engage more people? That, to me, I think would be an amazing 2021, and no masks.
No masks.
Why do you feel like Columbus in particular is built for this moment as a community?
I mean, I go back to that, the spirit of collaboration. I think there is a willingness in this community to go arm in arm and partner.
Yeah, same.
I know we're at time, yeah.
Wonderful. I heard lots of words there. Connecting, meaning, center on purpose and meaning, reframing questions, amazing resources, a spirit of the community that's come together, and the Columbus Way in a totally new dimension. Wouldn't it be cool if that dimension just lasts? I love what you all are saying. And I want the Hug app. How do I get the Hug app? Everybody should have a Hug app underneath their
Remote
Christmas
hugs
tree.
is what it's called.
Remote hugs, great. Well, I hope everyone out there found today's forum as inspiring as I did, and we hope that you'll share it with other people, because this is a nice thing to share on Facebook or pass around or share the link. For the next 2 Wednesdays, Columbus Metropolitan Club will be taking a break, but at noon during the holidays, we have a holiday package. We're sharing some encore forums that also are very inspiring, and they will be via live stream at noon on Wednesdays, just like our regular forums, across our other broadcast outlets, and we hope you'll tune in and make this a part of your holiday season. We look forward to seeing you back with us for the live stream on January 6th, 2021, with Dr. Bill Lafayette's 20th Annual Blue Chip Economic Forecast. So thank you to our live stream partners, support from the Emergency Fund of the Columbus Foundation, and in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch and PNC. Thanks to all of our virtual seat patrons. Thanks to all of you who are watching. And a special thank you to our speakers, Jordan Davis, Heather Tsavaris, Stacia Naquin, and thanks to all of you who have continued to support the Columbus Metropolitan Club during this last 9 months. We wish you well, happy holidays, and happy 2021.